I'm going to start this video by doing a little review of where we're at right now with our project. So we've done, in the first two sprints, we were really just learning the new platforms we're working on, like how to use them, how to get set up on them. Now we're moving on to really figuring out how to do machine learning operations, which has a couple different kind of parts to it, but that was one of the things we focused, one of those parts is what we focused on with this sprint. So really we worked on doing development operations with Databricks, which is kind of like code management for each phase of each phase of a machine learning service. And so that's what we really focused on. A lot of that is done actually outside Databricks, but we focused on how to integrate Databricks with external development operations tools. Next phase of our project is going to be looking into implementing the entire set of machine learning operations in Databricks, which includes the DevOps stuff we've done so far, as well as managing models and managing data. And we're going to do it with an example, with the example we worked on previously, which is financial fraud. So we'll set up a full machine learning service that's deployable that allows someone to detect financial fraud based on certain inputs. For most of the semester so far, we've been working on familiarizing ourselves with new features and platforms that we need to use. But now, in the last couple sprints, we're going to really focus on actually implementing some of the stuff we've learned and creating something that we can actually demo that demonstrates machine learning operations on Databricks. So basically what we're going to do is in our first sprint, we did a little demo of working in Databricks where we created like a financial fraud detection machine learning model. Really simple variation of it. We did it just in a notebook and it had some problems. But now we're going to actually try to take what we did there and convert it into like a full-blown service that you deploy to a customer or a user. So this is a little diagram. It's there's quite a bit going on because it's a big process. But I'll try to break down the most important stuff. A lot of this is just excess detail. So first we have to develop everything, right? So we're going to have to rewrite a bunch of scripts that do some operations for developing the models, processing data, basic machine learning stuff. And then additionally, we'll have to create some scripts for testing everything, testing our code, and then configuring the automated features of this machine learning operation system. More importantly, we talk about some of these transition stages. So as we develop, we're going to have to set up a system for testing the code we write and the models we develop. This particular part here, the dev to staging phase of things, is actually testing primarily the code that we develop, right? So every time we write code for tweaking how we train a model or how we process data, we're going to have to retest that code to make sure it works how we expect it to. And so we can do that. One way we can do that is through GitHub Actions. So GitHub has, since Databricks integrates with GitHub repositories, you can automate testing on those repositories with GitHub Actions. And you configure that with YAML files, and those deploy whatever tests you need to run or whatever tests you've designed right on GitHub. And once we're happy with those initial tests, that's when you start pulling the code you've developed to a staging environment. And in that staging environment, for this type of ML service, we basically want to be able to allow someone to interact with the machine learning model we create and figure out if it's working well. So in this staging phase of things, it's about the code should be good to go, and now we want to make sure the model and everything we've developed with the code is running how we want and how a user of the service would want. And so at this phase, it's not deployed. It's kind of like a testing phase, an opportunity to play around with what we've made. And so the primary thing we're doing is continuous deployment of the service somewhere. And that can be done, you can deploy through GitHub Actions. Again, the code can be deployed from GitHub. And one option is to deploy to a cloud provider like Amazon Web Services, and you can set up an image to run there, like a container. And then finally, after using the model we've created, if it's working sufficiently, then we work on actually deploying the staged version of our work into a production release environment that can exist in the long term and deploys to, or excuse me, it becomes available to actual users for regular use. In theory, it should work quite robustly at this point. And you additionally add monitoring to the release. So if it's released on AWS or something like that, then you'd have to configure, well, we will configure monitoring features for the release on AWS.
Hi everyone, today I'm going to be giving you a quick demo of our implementation of a simple CI/CD pipeline. So in this CI/CD pipeline, we are sorting an array of numbers and we are using AWS and Databricks for this implementation. And I'm going to be discussing the build part of this pipeline. So this is our environment. We're using AWS CodeStar right now. AWS CodeStar is a service which helps us build the pipeline easily. It consists of three three services, which is build pipeline, deploy pipeline, and code commit, or it uses some sort of code source, which in our case is GitHub. So we have chosen to use CodeStar because it gives us a pre-configured repository to start with, and it's easier compared to building your own pipeline from scratch because it configures all the settings for you. And since this is our first time um, building a CI/CD pipeline, we have decided to go with CodeStar. So this is the repository which has been generated by CodeStar. Um, we commit all our code to this test folder in the repository. README consists of all the details of our project. Build spec is a very important YAML file, which basically consists of the configurations of our pipeline, and all our code has been committed. So each time we commit our code to our GitHub repository from Databricks, our pipeline build is triggered. So these are the logs of all our previous builds, how they have failed and how we have debugged the errors and made it succeed. So I'm going to show you the recent most build. These are the logs where we can keep a track of our build. We can check if our build is successful or not, and maybe debug any kind of errors from here. This these logs are very much related to the YAML file or the configuration file, which is called buildspec.yaml, which I'm just going to demonstrate to you next. So here is our YAML file, which consists of a lot of configurations. It has the pre-build stage and the build stage, and a few of the installs we have to do is we're using Spark and PySpark. We have to install these, and the build stage is what runs our um, Databricks file. And currently, we're not doing any testing because it's a simple CI/CD pipeline and it's a simple sort. So we're keeping that for later. Since the main motive of our project is to document our journey through Databricks and using Databricks for different projects, we have documented what we have learned from this exercise. And what we're going to be doing forward is trying to implement data coming in through an S3 bucket, or maybe in a CSV file, and the pipeline getting triggered and sorting an output and giving us the output in the form of a web application. So now Balaji is going to talk about the deployment part of our project.
Before I talk about the deployment process, I would like to go over a few things first. Our goal is to build a CI/CD pipeline with Databricks. On Databricks, you'll be able to write your code and also make changes to your code. But we need another tool to implement a CI/CD pipeline. CI/CD is one of the best practices of DevOps. So we need a DevOps tool to manage the pipeline. Many companies like Amazon and Microsoft, they provide us with DevOps tools. For example, Microsoft provides Microsoft DevOps or Azure DevOps, but we will be using the service provided by Amazon. That's called CodeStar. It's called Amazon CodeStar. So it is a service which helps you build, test, and deploy your applications in a really smooth way. And I'm just going to show you a quick demo of the platform and the pipeline that we built on the platform. If you look at the top, you can see multiple tabs. You can see an overview tab, which is going to give you a brief summary about the project and the tools that we used for the project. We can also integrate an IDE into our platform. The code is mostly stored in either GitHub or something called Amazon Code Commit. That's going to be a service for managing repositories. And then we have the pipeline over here. I'm going to go over the pipeline stages in a bit. So the pipeline has multiple stages. The first stage is to get the source code. It's called source. So you're getting the code either from GitHub or from Amazon Code Commit. Once you get the code, you try to build it. That's going to be our next stage called building stage. So in our building stage, we will be compiling our source code and doing some integration and simple tests on the code to make sure that the build actually worked. And the build is mostly conducted by AWS Code Build, which is again offered by Amazon. If the build and the tests are successful, then we will be ready to deploy our software artifact to a production environment. So the next and the last stage is going to be the deployment stage. And we will be deploying the software artifact from the build stage to the production environment. And this is done mainly by AWS CloudFormation. So we can deploy the application onto multiple environments. For example, we can deploy it to Amazon Lambda, which is like a serverless environment for managing applications. Or we can deploy it to an EC2 instance, which is a virtual server managed by the Amazon cloud. That EC2, it follows the infrastructure as a service model. Or we can deploy it to the Elastic Beanstalk offered by Amazon. And the Elastic Beanstalk is a simple service for deploying and managing web applications. In our case, we will be deploying it to the Amazon Elastic Beanstalk platform. So I will show you how it's going to look on the platform. So if I click on View Application, I can see a simple web application, which is actually a Django web application. So this is how it's going to be looking after deployment. And our next step is so we already built the sorting algorithm and everything was working fine with it. We just need to print it out on this web page, and that's going to be our next step for now.